I didn't change my oil for 15,000 miles, and it almost cost me an engine. That's right, I've been running this high dollar oil and bypass filter system from Amsoil for the last year, and it almost cost me that Duramax. Stay tuned to find out how. We have a problem with my balls. Longer engine oil life, confirmed by science. Allegedly. Insane. I'm thinking we should probably, a lot of girth on this one. Autopsy complete. Centrifuge filters and toilet paper filters. It's science. Welcome to the Freedom Works. My name's Jamin and I overthink things so you don't have to. I'm like AI, except factual. Probably. So let me get you guys caught up. For the last year, I've been running the Amsoil synthetic diesel oil and Amsoil dual bypass filtration system on my 2006 GMC Duramax. What in the world? Somebody just stuck a chicken wing under my door. It's like Christmas. My plan was to only change the filters and never change the oil unless the lab told me it was needed. It's been 15,000 miles and I've got big news. And unfortunately, it's bad news for my engine. I'll link to the previous video in the description below if you want to get the entire backstory and learn everything you never wanted to know about oil filtration. Almost. So let's talk about the roadmap for this video. Broke out the Magnum. Only Magnum I'll ever get to use. Wait, 44 Magnum. I actually have a couple of those. It is spelled right, isn't it? First, I'm going to debunk some myths about why you have to change your oil, or why a bypass filter can't extend engine oil life. Now personally, I wouldn't trust a guy that talks like me, so I brought backup from the Oil Analysis Lab and the Society of Automotive Engineers. Secondly, let's go with blue. I'll discuss the results of the analysis on my virgin oil, 10,000 mile oil, and 15,000 mile oil. Virgin engine oil, not olive oil. And finally, with the red Magnum, I'm going to discuss how I plan to move forward with this never change my engine oil in the name of science fiasco. Because the fact that this oil filtration system is in my hand, instead of being bolted to my truck, should be an indication to you that we have a problem. But first, did you know that 75W85 gear oil is actually thinner than 15W40 engine oil? Yep, it's a fact. And allow me to demonstrate with my balls. These just happen to be blue. Now, both of these oils are at the exact same temperature. They've been in this room for days. Same elevation. Okay, it should be pretty easy to understand. I'm going to drop the balls in the oil. The ball in the thinner oil will reach the bottom first. Here we go. Well, there you go, thinner. And now I gotta clean up my mess. Oh shit, probably should have seen that one coming. So you're probably wondering, how can that be? These numbers are bigger than these numbers, so this should obviously be thicker. Well, a little known fact about viscosity ratings, engine oil viscosity and gear oil viscosity are on two different scales. It's like the difference between 100 degrees Fahrenheit and 100 degrees communist. One makes a good bath and the other makes a good boiled egg. So these numbers actually have no correlation to each other. I've actually got an entire video on this where I run both of these oils in the blown small block in my C20 service truck. I'll put a link to that in the description if you want to learn more. Now, back to bypass filtration. Now, broke my bacon. Guess we're working with a stubby now. Now, like I said before, I almost destroyed my Duramax. I know destroyed is a strong word, but it's the right word because it's true and it gets your attention. And before you guys start blasting me in the comments section, please understand, I'm not trying to convince people to stop changing their oil on a reasonable interval or on a regular basis. I'm simply trying to demonstrate that you don't need to keep changing your oil every 3,000 miles just because Dave's Auto Center, Scotty Kilmer, or your Bronco Billy Sue keep telling you that you need to. This is just me spending my time and money to be your interweb punching bag for science. Okay. Here's a list of the top 5 bypass filtration doesn't work because, courtesy of the comment section. Number 1, fuel will dilute the oil and it will be too thin to lubricate properly, you moron. I got a lot of those, not very nice. Number 2, filters don't remove condensation from the oil and it will cause sludge. I can understand why you feel that way. Number 3, the long chain polymers in the oil will shear and it will lose its viscosity. Ooh, y'all brought out the big words. Polymers. Number 4, you can't stop thermal breakdown, and I know because I saw the Castrol GTX commercial in 1993. Yeah, I saw it too. And number 5, filters can't replace additives, you idiot. Yeah, some of y'all need more Jesus. All right, let's break all these down. Let's separate fact from friction. See what I did there? Lubrication pun. Is that one too much? Number 1, fuel will dilute the oil and thin it out. Fuel can dilute the oil. Can dilute, not will dilute. Words matter. Fuel dilution can happen for multiple reasons. Leaky injectors, blow-by, incomplete combustion, paranoid schizophrenia. Now, some amount of fuel will end up in the oil during normal operation. Most people can grasp that. But what most people don't understand is that fuel will generally evaporate out of the oil. As long as excess fuel isn't introduced by a faulty component and the engine spends sufficient time at operating temperature, then most of the fuel will simply evaporate out of the oil. Fuel dilution is mainly a concern with modern diesels that use late in-cylinder injection for the purposes of regenerating the DPF in the exhaust system. So fuel dilution can be an issue, and that's why it's evaluated in used oil analyses. Number 2. Condensation will ruin the oil and cause sludge. It certainly can cause issues like sludge, but condensation actually evaporates out of the oil much more easily than fuel does. All right, number 3. Long chain polymers will shear and the oil will lose its viscosity. There's actually some truth to this one. In the simplest terms, if you want to produce a 5W30 purple oil, well, step 1, add purple dye to it. But 2, you're going to start with a thin base oil that meets the requirements of SAE 5W when the oil's cold. And then you're going to sprinkle in some viscosity modifiers. Viscosity modifiers are the long chain polymers that people don't know they're talking about. You're going to sprinkle in some viscosity modifiers so that the oil will have a viscosity consistent with an SAE 30 when it's hot. So 5W base oil with viscosity modifiers added to make it an SAE 30 when it's hot. In the layman's terms, viscosity modifiers are molecules that ball up when they're cold, and then when they get hot, they open up or blossom like a hollow pernt bullet. Pernt, somewhat hollow. And that somehow keeps the oil from thinning out so much. Chemistry. So, a 0W40 oil has a lot of viscosity modifier in it. But a premium synthetic 15W40 or 10W30, like these, will have a very small amount of viscosity modifier. So guess what? This oil and this oil aren't very susceptible to viscosity loss caused by shear. But a 0W40 oil is very susceptible. Probably. So, oil shear can be an issue, but it depends on the oil and the application. Number 4. You can't stop thermal breakdown. Well, hold my sparkling water. Well, first, let's distinguish between thermal breakdown, which is really just oxidation, and thermal failure. Oxidation is when the oil molecule loses electrons while it's gaining oxygen molecules. It changes the taste and the length of the oil molecules. In the simplest term, oil oxidizes when it's exposed to oxygen, heat, and contaminants. More heat and more contaminants means more oxidation and decreased oil life. Thermal failure of oil is when the oil is exposed to extreme heat and the oil molecules are actually damaged or cracked. And I doubt many of you are actually dealing with thermal failure unless you're driving a Formula One car to the Dollar General. So, if you use a premium synthetic, remove more of the contaminants, and control the heat, you can slow the oxidation. It's science. And number 5, filters don't replace the additives, so the oil becomes ineffective. And that's logic, but there are a couple things you have to consider. First, removing more of the contaminants reduces the depletion of the additives. And second, every time you replace one of these big-ass filters, you add some new oil that's full of fresh vitamins and minerals. So basically, it's a function of whether the additives are being replenished as fast as they're being depleted. It's a race. Okay, let's look at the numbers and see if the experts were right. But first, a word from the sponsor of today's video, me. If you want to help me produce more content and better content, then hit those like and subscribe buttons, leave a comment, and share the video. All that helps me to produce cash to waste on more gearhead science. And I'm feeling the urge to blow up an engine soon. So subscribe with your wife's account also. So I've got analyses for the virgin Amsoil and for the Amsoil after 10,000 miles and 15,000 miles being ran through these filters. Throw it down in the comments if you find the glaring red flag in these analyses. And yes, there is one huge red flag, like a girlfriend without any girlfriends. Huge red flag. Speaking from experience. So what do we need to focus on in these analyses to verify that the oil and the filters are still performing properly? Primarily viscosity, or total base number, TBN, or total acid number, TAN, pick your poison, fuel dilution, insolubles, and wear metals. And because this is a diesel, we'll also look at soot. This other stuff matters, but those are my top 5. You gotta draw the line somewhere. Viscosity is easy. It's simply thickness or resistance to flow. And guess what? It's still just fine. If it weren't, it could be a result of fuel dilution, shear, excess heat, STDs, etc. Now, TBN is basically the oil's ability to neutralize acids that form in the oil due to combustion byproducts. Now, TBN drops over the life of the oil as the additives that neutralize the acids are used up. As you can see from the analysis, the TBN is still perfectly fine. Now, conversely, you can monitor TAN, or total acid number, which is a more direct method of measuring acidic compounds in the oil. There seems to be a trend in switching to monitoring TAN instead of TBN. So that's what I'll be doing moving forward. So let's talk about fuel dilution. So although 469 people told me I was stupid because filters can't remove fuel from the oil, here I am 15,000 miles later with basically no fuel in my oil. The fuel percentage is less than 0.5%, which is basically the lowest non-zero value that you can get. That's less than 2 ounces in 12 quarts of oil, I think. So how is this possible? It's simple, really. Not obvious, but simple. The fuel simply evaporates out of the oil. And I know some of you are already Googling the boiling point of diesel so you can prove me wrong in the comments. Well, don't waste your time. Google AI, which is never wrong, will tell you that the boiling point of diesel is between 325 degrees Fahrenheit and 675 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on what day you Google it and what color underwear you're not wearing. Between 325 and 675. Aha! Your engine oil will never get that hot. You got me, right? Not really. This is the simple but not obvious part. You don't need boiling, you need evaporation. So you should have Googled the flash point of diesel, not the boiling point. Because the flash point is where diesel starts evaporating. And it's between 125 and 205 degrees freedom. And yes, your oil certainly gets that hot. SAE paper 2013-01-2680, which is titled Fuel Property Effects on Oil Dilution in Diesel Engines, which you too can own for the low price of $39, explains all this in depth. So let's take a look at some graphs from this study. This graph shows the subtraction rate of fuel from oil for 4 different fuel blends for oil that is at 100 degrees communist, that's 212 here in the States, over a 24-hour period. Let's focus on the EN590 fuel, because that's the European fuel spec, which is the closest thing to the crap fuel we have here in the US. The others are basically different blends of EN590 fuel with various amounts and types of different biodiesels. Now, as you can see, over the course of that 24 hours, the oil with the EN590 fuel dilution goes from 10% fuel to 6% fuel in 24 hours. And by the way, those are extremely high fuel dilution numbers, and you should never be operating an engine with that oil. But the point is, the fuel evaporated at 1% per 4 hours at 212 degrees freedom. But, and that's a big but, like a J-Lo but, all of the fuel will not evaporate at 212 degrees, because some of the components in diesel fuel need to be much hotter than 212 to actually evaporate. And they will, just not in the oil pan. And I know, your oil temp gauge, if you're fortunate enough to have one, is telling you that the average temp, or the oil temp in your pan, is 212 degrees, give or take 5 or 10 degrees. But there is one place in the engine where the oil gets much hotter. On the cylinder walls, where that engine's turning diesel fuel into toxic masculinity and torque. Ugh, man. Bacon's been there 5 days. Probably gonna need some Pepto. The fuel diluted oil is on your cylinder walls, lubricating your piston rings. And the fuel will actually evaporate out of that oil while it's sitting on that hot cylinder bore. Maybe I should make an entire video on fuel dilution. Okay, enough about fuel. Let's move on to insolubles. This is basically dirt or other solid contaminants in the oil. Ours are low because we obviously have really good filters that are still doing their job just fine. A rising trend in insolubles could indicate that your filters need changing, or that you have a poorly sealed air filter, or for you rebels, no air filter at all. Okay, let's talk about soot and then come back to wear metals. In a diesel, soot happens. Soot is going to get into your diesel engine oil. Period. And if you have an intact EGR system or some hog-ass smoke tune, you're going to get a lot of soot. Excess soot in the oil can increase viscosity, leave deposits, and accelerate engine wear. This Duramax had 0.02% soot after 10,500 miles of use. And that's pretty good considering it's allegedly emissions legal and only mildly tuned. Allegedly. Anything under 1% is considered good, and anything over 2% should raise an eyebrow. Because that indicates either the oil isn't being changed frequently enough, or you have something else going on that needs to be diagnosed. I didn't pay for a soot test at 15,000 miles, and you're going to find out why. Now for the fun one, wear metals. Wear metals are obviously lower than they were in previous analyses for this engine. Now, is that because the engine's producing less wear metals because of superior filtration? Well, maybe. But there are a few other things that are likely causing these low numbers. Well, first off, 2-micron bypass filters can actually catch some of the wear metal particles that the 20-micron full flow filters normally would not. Secondly, we actually have a couple extra quarts of oil flowing through our engine. So even if the amount of wear was exactly the same, the parts per million would still be lower because we've added more millions to the same number of parts. It's math. And 3, likely the biggest contributor to these lower wear metal numbers is the enormous amount of makeup oil that has been added to this engine since the bypass filter system was installed. And this is where the wheels kind of fell off of this experiment, and why this filter system is in my hand and not bolted to my truck. This seal that goes between this adapter and the oil filter mounting flange on my truck failed and sprayed 15 quarts of oil all over South Georgia over the course of about 50 miles. So this is why wear metals look so low and why I didn't pay for a soot test at 15,000 miles. The oil had just changed itself over the course of 50 miles and diluted a year's worth of results. So did any of you guys actually catch that? 15 quarts of makeup oil? So although the wear metals are lower, you can't definitively say the wear is lower. The only true way to know is to measure internal components within the engine, which I'm not going to do. But luckily, the smart guys that authored this SAE paper already did. And I'll show you how 4 different filter setups affected oil life and engine wear. In case you're wondering, that's a main bearing out of a 4,000 horsepower MAN diesel engine. All right, let's look at some blurry charts. I'm not sure I got my $39 worth on this purchase. There are 4 lines on each chart representing 4 different filter setups. 1 is your standard full flow filter. 2 is a full flow filter plus a stacked disc bypass filter. 3 is a full flow filter plus a centrifuge bypass filter, and 4 is a full flow centrifuge filter only. And none of them are truly representative of this type of filter system, but number 2 is the closest thing. And if a centrifuge filter sounds weird to you, that's okay. It's pretty common in large diesel applications, but most folks have never heard of or seen a centrifuge filter. There are 6 graphs, but we're just going to focus on the total impurities graph for simplicity's sake. So this is total impurities in weight percentage versus engine oil hours. It goes up to 4% impurities and 350 engine hours. Number 1 is the baseline because that's the standard full flow system that most people use. And you can break this curve into 3 distinct phases that represent filter performance. Phase 1 is normal for new filters. The filter is wide open and not very efficient, so a lot of impurities pass right through the filter. Phase 2 here is where the filter media pores start to actually clog up a little bit and the filter becomes more efficient. That's right, filters actually filter better the longer you run them, right up until the point where they don't. And that's phase 3 over here. The filter is actually so good at filtering now that all of the oil won't pass through the media. And the impurities are going around the filter media through the filter bypass instead of getting captured while they're trying to go through the media. Hopefully you can see how many more hours you can actually push the other filter systems while still maintaining the same or even less impurities. Number 3, which is the full flow plus the centrifuge bypass filter, is killing it. Impurities are much lower than they are with any of the other systems. Now let's talk about how those oils performed in these tests. There wasn't a graph in the SAE paper, so I had to make my own chart. And I'm sorry. And here's the chart that contains the criteria for when the oils needed to be changed. Not sure you can actually read it or understand it, but there it is. The engine with the full flow only filter needed to be changed at 225 hours due to high insolubles. The engine with the full flow plus the stacked disc bypass required changing at 300 hours due to high insolubles. The engine with the full flow filter plus the centrifuge bypass filter required an oil change at 350 hours due to high acidity. And the engine with the full flow centrifuge filter only required an oil change at 300 hours, again due to high acidity. Now, the best case scenario of all of those tests only yielded about a 50% increase in engine oil life over standard filtration. And that's pretty weak relative to my goals, but I'm not discouraged much. I'm going 100,000 miles, guaranteed, probably. And finally, let's talk about engine wear. Fortunately, there's already a chart for that because unlike most Imagineers, I do not have mad spreadsheet skills. Okay, this is a measure of wear on main and rod bearings, which, as I've demonstrated in other videos, is much less important to engine life compared to ring and cylinder bore wear. But it is much easier to measure, and I'm sure that's why they did it. As you can see on the far right, bypass filtration reduced wear on the bearings between 10% and 52%. And it should come as no surprise that the engine with the centrifuge bypass filter experienced the least amount of wear. I gotta give me some of those G-forces. So there you go. Longer engine oil life and less engine oil wear, confirmed by science. Okay, so what exactly happened to this filter system? Would I still recommend Amsoil products? And what now? Well, to me, the cause of the failure seems pretty clear. The installation instructions and Amsoil tech support specified a torque value that causes a compressive failure of this seal, which causes it to blow out 3 times. The first seal lasted a couple weeks before it started dripping oil all over my concrete driveway during cold starts. Amsoil sent me a fresh one, no questions asked, and told me to torque this adapter to 85 foot-pounds. 85 foot-pounds. This is an oil filter adapter seal, not a head gasket. The written instructions specify finger type plus 1 1/4 turns, which in and of itself is really unachievable, and I'm a pretty strong guy. For reference, their single bypass filter instructions say 40 foot-pounds. And some other manufacturers' instructions say snug, but not tight. Snug is subjective, but I'm thinking it's not 85 foot-pounds. And we did that dance a couple more times until the third seal on the truck turned into a squirter, a gusher. It squirted 15 quarts of oil all over South Georgia and South Georgia Motorsports Park during sick week with my Cummins hot rod in tow. Fortunately, I noticed that my oil pressure was lower than normal, so I swung into Walmart for several gallons of oil and a Fram Endurance filter. Stop scoffing. Yep, I had to remove this and install a Fram in the grass at the track just to get by. I was just lucky to have a jack and enough tools to make it happen. So needless to say, I'm done with this filter system. Amsoil offered me a full refund and it's going back to them. So I'm taking this Amsoil bypass filter system apart so I can clean it up and box it up and ship it back to Amsoil. There's the full flow filter. You notice anything peculiar about it? Like maybe all of that O-ring material that's clogging up the inlet to the oil filter? Sorry I didn't do this real time. I did not expect to see that when I took this off. I'm not gonna screw it back on there, try to fool you guys. This is what it looked like when it came off. Every bit of that is clogging up my oil filter. Insane. I'm thinking we should probably, I'm thinking we should probably dissect these filters. I recommend Pyrex. My wife loves it when I use her Pyrex for science. I've got a feeling we might find something interesting in this full flow filter. So we'll start with the bypass filter. Who doesn't love suspense? I've got the red Amazon filter cutter because it's red. I'll leave a link in the description. All right, let's cut. A lot of girth on this one. Kind of hard to get a grip. It's got a lot of oil on it too. Can't imagine how that got there. That's a robust can. Now we're done. Anti-drain back valve. It's got one of those for some reason. That is a thick mounting plate. Quality. I mean, it's black in there, but it's a filter. There's nothing to see there. And there's nothing spectacular in the bottom of this thing. Now what I'm wondering is if any of these long slivers of rubber, yeah, that's the piece of probably the first or second O-ring. That's a piece of the first or second O-ring. That's a piece of the first or second O-ring. In case you're wondering where the third O-ring seal is, it's right there. You see it looped around the adapter nut going into the elbow? That was on its way to that, just like these. Anywho, let's cut this one open and see if there's any goodies in here. This one's got some texture on it. A little easier to grip. It's kind of like the bottom end of a Fram. Hey, Fram's got that going for them. There it is. Anti-drain back valve and filter. There's a beard hair. I'll take the hit for that one. All right, so nothing really to see in here either. So it looks like all the rubber from these adapter seals pretty much stayed together and got hung in the cap of the full flow filter. Oh well, autopsy complete. Now I know some of you Amsoil fanboys are butthurt right now. Chill out. I'm not happy that I have to make this video. I like Amsoil. They make great oils and great filters. And they stood behind their product and their guarantee and offered me a full refund when we couldn't get things sorted out. So I would still recommend Amsoil oil and filters. They make premium products and I'll still likely use some of them in the future. But I cannot recommend this style of Amsoil dual bypass filtration system based on my own experience. And while I acknowledge that there could be some kind of strange anomaly associated with my specific installation, because strange things do happen, I truly believe there's a flaw in the design, manufacture, or assembly instructions that's causing this failure. And thanks to a lot of luck and my OCD tendencies to always look under my truck every time I approach it, I was able to avoid a locked up engine. It could have gone much worse for me, and I can't risk that happening to anyone else that might decide to buy one of these systems after seeing one of my videos. So there's that. Great company, but this is a product that I cannot recommend. So what now? Do I quit? Hell no. Success is right on the other side of failure. And I'll take another swing at destroying my engine with bypass filtration. Because my views on the validity of bypass filtration haven't changed. The only thing changing is the system I'm going to use. So let's talk about some unique and arguably better bypass filtration options. Centrifuge filters and toilet paper filters. Yep, you heard that right. Tickets, Mountain Money, John Wayne, 10 ply. But let's talk about centrifuges first. Centrifuge filters use the engine's own oil flow and pressure to spin oil in a cylinder at like 6,000 RPM so that the particles in the oil get slung against the wall of the cylinder by all the G-forces. And there they form a little layer of dinosaur paste that you can scrape out and throw on Karen's lawn. Pacific Performance Engineering, otherwise known as PPE, the same people that make this up pipe that I need to install, have produced a centrifuge filter for the Duramax for a long time. And they're currently working on a revised system that isn't available yet, but hopefully I can test that in the future. So let's talk about toilet paper filtration. This is the Hot Shot Secret bypass filtration system. This style of toilet paper filter was first introduced and sold by John France in 1953. And you're probably used to seeing it look like this. But Hot Shot Secret's bought France filters in 2014. They made some improvements to the filter media and some of the other system components, and they're now being sold as Hot Shot Secret's bypass filtration systems. Like this. Actually, this is a new thing. I'm not even sure you guys can buy these things yet, but I know a guy. As stated, these filters originally used standard toilet paper rolls, and I guess you still could, but there are dedicated filter elements these days. It's basically NASA grade tickets. These are $5. I'd just buy this. This system will do the same thing as this system, hopefully without leaking oil all over Georgia. The filters just look different and cost a lot less. So this is what we're going with next. We have to start from scratch at mile 0 with the oil, because although I didn't technically perform an oil change, it's actually changed itself more than once over the last 16,000 miles. So stick around for 100% Group 4 PAO engine oil and toilet paper filter excitement. Please consider smashing those like and subscribe buttons, leave a comment, and share this video with your know-it-all brother-in-law. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious.